Welcome to APCUG's Saturday Safari, where we get together and travel down the viney paths of the jungle of technology, looking for that golden answer to our questions. Today's presentation is actually one from Judy, who asked the question, "What do you mean by that?" What that came from is that there are many terms that we in the Linux world throw out because that's just the lingo that we talk. And people who are not full-time Linux people hear things and they go, "What in the world are you talking about?" So she said, "Well, why don't you put together a presentation with all that Linux jingle, whatever I said, and help me understand in my terms what the heck you're talking about." So that's what we're going to do right now. Linux jargon, what does that mean? So we're going to go through a lot of words and terms, and afterwards I'll probably be graded by Judy on how well I've made her understand what I'm talking about. First off, the question, what is Linux? And unfortunately, I'm going to have to tell you that we have been lying to you all along, because we say Linux is an operating system, and that is not true. It's an operating system? No. But we call it that because it's easier for us to say Linux, Windows, Mac OS, or iOS than what we would have to do with the term Linux. Linux is actually the engine, like the engine of your car. It's the basic beginning of the operating system. It's called the kernel. But it was nice because the kernel was developed by a guy named Linus. And so coming from the old computer world, well, not necessarily old, still there, Unix, we combined the version of Unix that Linus kind of helped build up, and we kind of call it Linux. But I have to be honest and say that all of us that say, Linux, we're saying it wrong because it's an operating engine like in your car. So we'll build up that operating system that we call Linux a little bit later. So what I want to do is I want to take for Judy some of these words that we toss out and help people understand what we're talking about when you come to one of our workshops. The first one, super key. We talk about super key. Windows people have no idea what we're talking about. Well, that's because the Windows key that you have on your keyboard for your Windows is actually what we call the super key, because I don't want to call it the Windows key. I'm not using Windows. It's the super key. It's the same key. It's the same key that acts like the ones on Macs when we had back in the old days, the open Apple and the close Apple. They had two super keys. Windows only had one. Now, you might say, well, my keyboard has two. Well, it's the left one and the right one. It's just for whichever pinky you want to hit it with. So it's a key that you use to perform lots of different keyboard shortcuts. So if someone says press the super key, it's just that Windows key. I am still on the lookout because I found it before and then I can't find it. There are stickers that we can put on our Linux computers and laptops that's a penguin and stick it right there on top of that Windows key and cover up that window. or we can have one that will say super. So super key is just the Windows key. We talk a lot about dual booting. And that means we're not putting on two different boots or two different kinds of boots. So, dual booting is a technique to have two different operating systems installed, either on the same hard drive, or in the case that I use on my one desktop, I have two separate hard drives. One is a Windows operating system, and one is the Linux operating system. And when you start up the machine, you have a menu that says, what do you want to use? Now, I've got a note in my thing, LCCS. Our computer club had a teaching lab. We had 12 different computers and a teaching computer. We taught Windows, and then eventually, because of the popularity of Linux, we also taught Linux. So we ended up having to have dual booting. So we had either a choice of Windows or Linux. That doesn't work always great. Not going to talk more about that. It doesn't work. So we had two hard drives, a Windows hard drive and a Linux. And when we started up, we switched to which one we wanted. But in our Windows, with our teaching, we also had dual boots on Windows side, because when Windows 7 was out there, people were still using XP. So we had to be able to go back and forth. And then when 7 went to 8, we skipped over 8. And to 10, we were running computers that had Windows 7 and 10 and a separate hard drive, for Linux. So dual booting just means that you have the capability of having two separate operating systems running not at the same time, but whichever one you want. Another word that you hear a lot about is sudo. And so that's a strange kind of sounding word, but sudo comes from SU being super user and do something. And this is a command that we use to get elevated privileges, meaning we have administrative rights to do something, and then we stop doing it. When you want to make a system-wide change, an admin has to make it. A standard user can't. And so if you're in the command line using work, we do a command called sudo, change me to the super user so I can do something, and then you do it. Now, in Windows, they do a little bit different. Your user that you create is either an admin user or a standard user. The admin user has complete control and access and can do anything on your computer that it wants to do. When you're a standard user, you're not allowed to make changes that affect anybody else that might be using that computer, or that would change the computer itself, even to the fact that you cannot adjust the time on your computer unless an admin approves that. So with Microsoft, when you are a standard user, you have to be able to provide an admin user and their password in order to make some changes. And you've seen that happen when it pops up when you want to do something. If you are an admin, you just go ahead and do it. But that's sudo. You often hear us talk about open source software. I'm big on that. You'll hear me mention that almost as much as I can. It's like a recipe. You know what's in it. When you go to a potluck, you see a dish there and you're going, gee, I wonder what's in that. Is there anything in that's going to make me sick? So you have to ask somebody about the recipe. Some people do not want to give you the recipe. They don't want you to know what they put in to make this. Other people give you the recipe, and so you know exactly what it is. And this allows you, as the person making a recipe, to take to a family gathering. If you know that somebody has a food allergy and that this recipe includes that, then you can advise them not to eat it, or you can change your recipe. And that's what open source, the code for all the software that is created, is open for inspection. People can view it, and many people make changes for the better. My wife does that with recipes all the time. We'll get a recipe and she'll fix something the way it says, and then she'll say, gee, I wonder what it would be like if we did this. Well, open source software, the same thing can happen. A developer can say, hey, this is a pretty neat program, but you know, if we modify the code like this and this and this, it'll make it even better. And that's allowed. Many times we have had software get better and better because somebody knew the recipe and was able to make the changes. Now, on the other hand, Microsoft and Apple, they are closed source, and they don't let anybody see what's in the code except the developers. They are very private. Now, with the open source software, viruses and malware, people can find them real quickly because the code is open for anybody to see it. And there are people not like me who spend their days reading source codes, looking for things that shouldn't be there. And because they find them quicker, they get fixed quicker. Oh, I thought there was one more there. And that's why if something in open source, which Linux itself is open source, someone tries to sneak something in, it is usually found and fixed before most people even know there was a problem. Another reason about Linux security, Judy. Another word we talk about a lot, and I'm a real proponent of and push for it, is cross-platform software. And cross-platform means that it works on multiple operating systems, such as the three we're most familiar with, Linux, Windows, and Mac. So these are people that have made a piece of software that will run on each. LibreOffice, as an example we've been talking about today, will run on Windows and runs on Linux. I'm not sure about Mac OS because I'm not a Mac person. That's somebody else. But some software has only been designed to work on one or maybe two. A lot of software is made for Windows only. That's not nice. Part of it's because some software has a price tag to it, and only Windows people will pay for software. Some have been designed for Windows and Mac, but then a lot will do for open source. Open source makes it so much easier because that way people on different operating systems can use the same software. Same for cars. Our cars that are made, they'll all can be using the same gasoline. Fords don't go to this station. General Motors don't have to go to this station. If it would cause some problems in lines. Another word that I toss around a lot, people toss around, is flavors. Now, we're not talking about soft drinks or ice cream. A flavor would be a variation of a Linux version. Because of open source, somebody says, well, here's a Linux version that's pretty good, but I think if we adjust and do this, it will be better. It's just like variations on a car model. I suppose you could say the difference between a 4-door and a 2-door, or a 4-door and a convertible, hardtop and a convertible. So a flavor is one of the Linux operating systems that is based on a mainstay one, and they don't want to call it the same one they call it a flavor. Similar to the original, but has slight differences. And as we talk later, we'll see that in our workshops about how that flavor goes. We talk about LTS and non-LTS releases. Now, a release cycle is the period where you can expect software or the operating system, because operating system is software, to get a new upgrade while marking the end of life of the current version. And we have two parts. If you have something that's mentioned as long-term support, that's LTS, it means the software or operating system will get updates for a long duration of time, focusing on stability, and they want that over bleeding edge. And as an example, you Windows people know that Windows 7 had an 11-year life, and Windows 10, their 10 years comes to an end in October. So those were long-term. They ran and ran and ran, but for some reason, Microsoft says you got to do a new one. Now, depending on the software, the version, the duration's different. Now, Ubuntu, I mentioned earlier, was one of the probably the most popular because they've got financial background, and it has an LTS release. Comes out every even year. So the last LTS release, long-term support, came out in 24 in April. It is good for 5 years of updates. So you could use that one until April of 29. And then it goes out of its support. Now, some of the Ubuntu flavors only get 3 years because those developers want to go on with something new. We want to get a newer one. But Ubuntu, based on so many businesses using it, they want those 5 years. But after the 5 years is up, they got to go backwards 1 year and lose 1 year on the newest version that came out in 28. Non-LTS, the opposite. It has a short duration. For example, Ubuntu had a version come out in 2504 just a couple months ago. It's only good for 9 months because they have a version that comes out every 6 months. Not a big version, maybe the big version comes out every 2 years, but it's a limited 9 months. So within 9 months, you've got to switch to something else. We also have what's called point and rolling release. Rolling is the word that Linux people use, that Windows people, A point release is the minor update. All of your software has that. It'll be version number point something. So right now, Linux Mint main version was 22. But 6 months later, they came out with some updates. So the version out right now is 22.1. Windows people know the same thing because we've gone through this new thing that Microsoft did for your computers, the Windows 10, with these 21H1, 21H2. And then all of a sudden, the 22H1 disappeared, but we went to 22H2. So you've got some point releases inside of Windows. The only problem is Windows 10, you stopped with 22H2. You haven't got any good point releases since then. Windows 11, because that's their babe, they were at 23.2 and now have gone to 24. But the problem is some of your older computers will not be able to go to 24. So you've got a problem. Now, rolling release is the one that Windows totally doesn't know about. And that means that it never updates. It just gets updates all along. So it's like a train. You just jump on the train when it comes by your house. And at that moment, you have the most current version. And as you travel, you get all the updates keep coming. You never have to upgrade your computer unless some big crash happens. Now, the one problem with that is rolling releases give you the newest and greatest and whatever that might not always be tested out so that it doesn't cause problems. But people who like rolling releases want the newest and latest and greatest, and so they put up with that. But that's the difference. Long-term support, short-term support, and the rolling releases. Now, this isn't really a Linux one, but I bring it up because it's an issue that we all face called end of life. And that's when whatever software you have, which could be your operating system, because again, it's software, is going to stop. The company is stopping any maintenance and security. And that happens to Linux too. The problem with the advantage with Linux, switching Linux doesn't cost you anything. Switching Windows could cost you something. End of life for Ubuntu 2004, I mentioned, was April of 29. And there are lots of different release cycles for other program software. And we know the end of life for Windows people is October 25th, and that's going to be an interesting day or month. Vanilla. Vanilla is a word we use, but I'm still not talking about ice cream. This refers to a program or an operating system that has not been changed or customized. I showed you what I said would have been a vanilla Linux Mint, but I lied because I added the calendar so you could see that it has a working calendar just like Windows does. But when you take a program that has not been changed, we consider that vanilla. Very straight, the way it was supposed to be in the beginning. It's in its original form. Now, browsers were kind of like that. Firefox and Chromium are original browsers. But then people have taken those and made other variations that are not vanilla. They're not the original. You know, even Edge is a form of Chromium and Chrome that they've added to it. But if you wanted the pure vanilla one, you'd go back to the very beginning where it had its birth and stuff. All right, so now let's go. This is what I told you, it might not be the fun part, but we talk about Linux as an operating system, and I told you, no, it's not. It's a kernel. So we're going to talk about that operating system and what it has, because we talk about that. We talk a lot about the kernel. We have kernel updates, and Judy sits back and says, why? Was somebody a major and became a colonel or something? Well, the kernel is the core of the operating system. It's the one that starts and interacts with all your hardware, all your software, and that helps you take control. It's the kernel. And it's the actual part that's called Linux. It is the Linux kernel. But we call Linux Linux when it's really just a kernel. So it's the lowest part of the OS. And it's not just a Linux thing. Every operating system is built on a kernel. Even Windows. You didn't know it, but years ago, before Windows 2000, when we came out with Windows NT, well, Windows NT, that's the kernel for Windows. And XNU is the kernel for the Mac's operating system. So everybody has a kernel, but Windows people never talk about the kernel. Linux people do, you know, that confuses people. It's just the engine that runs everything. So what I decided is that we probably made the mistake of calling Linux Linux. We probably should have called it Penguin, because that's its logo. Microsoft operating system is called Windows, because that's their logo. And Apple's kind of was called Apple because that was their logo. So the Linux logo is Penguin. So we probably should be calling our operating system Penguin. I like that, but a lot of people don't like that I like that way. But before the kernel can react, so you have a kernel, but you need all the other parts like of a car. So we have a bootloader. Linux people talk about bootloaders. Windows people really don't, but it's there. It's the software that manages the booting up process. And usually it's just a splash screen. So you've seen that splash screen. It pops up on your Windows and those crazy little dots go running around in circles. Well, that's your bootloader going. Goes away and you get your regular operating system. But that's the part in the beginning that gets your computer up and going. Now, you hear us in Linux, we talk a lot about grub because Linux is more open to things. And grub is just the grand unified bootloader. That's where the GRU comes from in front of the bootloader. So it's the managing program that starts it up. If you have multiple operating systems on your hard drive or in your computer, the grub notices that, and then that's what gives you the choice. It gives you the menu that says, okay, I've discovered you have 2 operating systems. Which one do you want? So grub will do that. If you only have 1 operating system, then you don't see this because it's like one of those things. Duh, if there's no choice, you don't need to ask for it. Yet, if you go to McDonald's, we go to McDonald's, they have chocolate chip cookies. That's all. But if the person ringing up your order, they are asked you which kind. And you look at them funny because they only have 1 kind, chocolate chip. Well, years ago, they had an oatmeal raisin and a chocolate chip. Well, they got rid of the oatmeal raisin, but nobody updated the menu ordering system that when you click cookies, it pops up and says which kind. Once the workers ask you that, and you kind of embarrass them by saying, well, you only have 1 kind, they know not to ask you the next time. So if you only have 1 operating system, you don't usually see grub in the background. We have an it, not an itch, an it. And that's what takes place next. It's the what we call bootstraps, the self-starting processes that connects the user space and connects and charged with controlling daemons. And you've heard, we've talked about it in our meetings, we have a system D, and that's our initialization system. That's what init is, initialization. And it is kind of controversially, and some systems are trying to go a different route. But that's what, once the initial booting is handed over from the bootloader, then the init system takes over. Now, I mentioned the word daemon. Well, this is not something for Halloween time. This is just a program that runs in the background and checks things, like hooking up your printer, your sound, your scheduling. They are running in the background. They are told to go out and do stuff. Those are like little helpers that go out. One of the ones that are on your Windows system and on Linux system is the update daemon. It goes out to see if you've got any updates. And if you do, it lets you know. Somewhere it pops up and says, you've got updates. So the daemons, they go out and do all sorts of little stuff in the background. You know, that's how when you start up, your printer works because it's connected, your sound works and all that. You never see them really doing anything, but you know when they don't do something. A display manager, I think this is named wrong because this is your login screen. Now, this is the program where you log in, and the login screen also lets your computer know who you are and what rights you have when you work in that computer. It comes before the desktop environment, but everybody has to log in. In the old days, we just did it with a little text thing, but now we've got a nice display screen that looks nice and can have pictures and has our names and we can click on them. The old Windows 1 used to have a little icon for every user. Popular ones that we talk about, GDM, the Grand Desktop Manager. Light DM is what most Linux uses. That's the one that's on my Mint. And to me, I don't know. It's just a screen that pops up where I can log in. Then we have the display graphics server. And that's what gets you your graphical user. Many of us went way back to the DOS days with no graphical user. And we're all thankful that we now have a display server or graphic server that gives us a pretty looking thing instead of just all text. Now, this is not the word I'm going to talk about next, desktop environment. The desktop environment includes the display server under the hood, because if it didn't have one, then you wouldn't see the desktop. Ones we've mentioned that you hear about is X11 or Xorg, and the new one that's starting up is called Wayland. There's a lot of controversy about Wayland not working as good as Xorg, but people say the X11 Xorg is so old we need to have a new one. And Wayland causes me a problem, because if I ever try to work with somebody remote access with my program AnyDesk, it will not work with Wayland. They have to sign out and sign back in with the Xorg desktop to get that to work. That's a hassle between the software developers and between the developers, between Wayland and AnyDesk on that. All right, now we get the desktop environment, and this is what makes Linux versions the biggest difference that we talk about. And this has everything that you see. That's your environment. All of the icons, toolbars, the panels, the widgets that go on desktops, the wallpaper that goes behind, all of that stuff that you see, that's going to be part of this desktop environment. And we have names for these desktop environments. There are a number of them. And like I said, with the open source, it's where somebody took one and said, oh, I like that, but let's make some changes here. For example, GNOME and KDE were one of the first original desktop environments way back at the beginning of Linux times. Well, people didn't like the changes that GNOME was making through their developers. So one group said, we don't like exactly what you're doing, but we kind of like what you're doing, but we need to make some changes. So Cinnamon is the one that is a branch off of the newest GNOME that a lot of people didn't like. Now, a lot of people said, we don't even like what GNOME went to. We like the old version of GNOME, which was GNOME 2. So a group of developers created Mate based on the old GNOME 2. It's modern, but it was based on that structure. KDE made through some changes, and there were some people who didn't like it, and I didn't have it listed, but there is a desktop called Trinity that is the old KDE. Now it's KDE Plasma. So they run that one. So everybody has choices, like in a car, which kind of model you like. A few of the new ones are Pantheon, Enlightenment, and an old standby XFCE. And some of them have their value. XFCE is supposed to be one of the lightest weight ones, along with Enlightenment, for old computers. So you can have a desktop environment that's not too much of a drain hog. And each of these desktop includes all of those visual things that you have, plus things like the file manager, the configuration tools that you'd find in settings, whatever web browser they want to make is theirs, whatever games they might want, whatever software. So that's why if you go from a desktop environment to a different desktop environment, there might be some differences in what software they chose to include. You also have tiling window manager, and we kind of knew about that in Windows. That just means that you put multiple windows up side by side. and then you could work back and forth between them. And so in Linux, they have some others where it kind of divides up your computer, and you can have command lines running in some and regular programs in some. But people say that this helps you organize things better in a tile layout instead of laying on top of each other. Now, for some people, they claim it boosts their productivity, and they think it makes their desktop prettier. Other people say it's too complicated to set up all these tiles the way I want it, and then going back and forth. One of the nice things about Linux is you can create and customize to the way you want it. And if the distro that you picked won't let you do that, well, then you go to another distro because it doesn't cost you anything. Okay, applications, that's kind of a common thing. Sometimes I tell, Judy says, what? When I say, I go back and forth between the words like software programs and clients. And clients is just a program that works for you, like your email. That email program is really an email client because it goes out and gets your mail for you. So desktops don't offer everything. Now, I will tell you, there are a few versions of even Ubuntu. There's one that comes with the kitchen sink. It has everything that you don't want included because somebody might. So we have software stores, like I showed you earlier, that you can add any programs that you want that they didn't install for you by default, and then it becomes your special customization version of Linux. And of course, the vast amount of software for Linux is open source free. So we have app stores just like that where you could go. And the purpose of the app store is that way you go to the app store and you get the software right from the warehouse of the distribution, and you're not going out on the internet down dark alleys picking up something you shouldn't. And each distro or desktop designs has an idea of how the software store should look. And through that, you can easily remove apps that you don't want. You add them, you remove them. Sort of like your installation program and your removal program. One of the things that you don't hear about in Windows very often, because you just go to the store and install it, or you just stay with whatever came with Windows, are package managers. And this is the tool that lets you install. So in Linux, we've got package managers that lets us install them. They go all the way from being a terminal text-based version all the way to graphical. And the store that I showed you, that's the full graphical one. And we have different kinds of package managers. And I tell people this is like we have different kind of fuels. We've got gas, electric, diesel, and other ones. So our package managers are like that. One group of Linux distributions uses app and manages what we call deb files. And one group of Linux distributions that hover together about RPM files with Red Hat. So that just means that, I would say it's more like the tools that we have, metric and imperial. On some cars, you've got to use the metric design. Some kind of people, you can use imperial. And in between those two, Synaptic is a GUI-based one, but it's not as simple and streamlined as the software store. So you can go as how you like it. If you really like to get in and get your hands dirty, you can go into the command line and use the package manager that way, or you can just stick with the GUI one and just say, I want this software, install it. Now, I marked the DLL down there because we have dealt with this kind of an issue back in the days. Software is made up of lots of different parts. Like recipes are made up of lots of different ingredients. And when you want to do some baking and stuff, you go to the store and you buy all these different kind of ingredients, salt, sugar, flour, this and that and whatever, and you have it on your shelf. When you get out a recipe, you look and see what you already have. And if you already have it, great. And if you have something on that recipe that you don't have, you're heading back to the store and getting it. Well, the package manager does the same thing. When in Windows, we were installing, the installer that was in the background looked around your computer to see what ingredients you already had that they needed. And when they saw that you had something for another program, they said, oh, good, it's already here. We'll use that one that they're using for other such and such program. And these were all those DLL files that you might have seen. And if you didn't have the one they needed, they would go out and get it and install it on your computer. And then some future program could use one of your DLLs for them. That kind of made it so we didn't have so much clutter. But if the first package that was using a DLL was deleted and deleted that DLL, then a package that was dependent on that one won't work anymore. So we had our problems because you would get error messages. I can remember them, missing a DLL. That's why. Nowadays, we have something newer. We've done presentations. Cal has done a couple of great ones on ours. You can find past videos, and we'll probably talk about more. And these are what we call containers. And the names are Snap, Flatpak, and AppImage. And these are like going when we, okay, these are like the things you see on TV where people call for the dinner and a box comes and it includes everything you need to fix that meal. It includes all the spices and all the vegetables and all whatever, all comes in that box. So the same thing. Nowadays, we've got these container packages, Snaps, Flatpaks, and AppImage that come with everything that you need. It isn't dependent on anything that's on your computer or not on your computer. What's also nice about it, just like in the one that you're ordering, it can go to anybody's house and they can use it. These containers can be used by any Linux operating because it contains everything that you want. And they're very easy. When you want one, you order it and you use it. When you don't want it, you delete it and go get something else. So containers are the new things that are going to be coming around. You know, they have certain differences among each other. The Snap is made by Ubuntu. Flatpak is the major one. Another one that's coming is an AppImage. And the AppImage is like, but is similar to an exe file that Windows people use. You just click it to run it. You don't install it. You just run it. Flatpak gets installed, Snaps get installed, but they get installed as a container. So they're very cross-distribution friendly. So we come to the end. We put it all together, and what do you get? Bibbidi bobbidi. Well, we're not going to sing that song. We get a distro. You put all that together, and now we finally have a distro. Short for distribution. This is the complete package that is built by some company, started long time ago, many slides ago with that kernel, and then added everything, and then hands you the completed operating system that we call a distro, that we actually call Linux, but we shouldn't. There are hundreds of these because open source means I think I can make a better one. Some of these are better, some of them are not so. Some of them have been around for a long time. Some of them come and go, depending on who's developing them. But all of them are the same. They begin at the beginning with the kernel, and they layer all those up, but they build it like they want to. And that's how it is, just like cars. All cars have an engine. All cars' engines are connected to the drive to power it and move it. All cars have steering wheels to change the direction of the wheels. All cars have gas pedals to go faster. All cars have brakes to go slower. All cars usually have some kind of musical device. We used to say radios. Now some cars don't have radios because they've got only Siri, satellite radio. But you can see the difference that's just like a car. And we have all those different cars because different companies say, we know how to build a better car. But within each company, we have different models. At one time, General Motors had 5 different divisions making the same kind of cars, only slightly different. Maybe some were better with acoustics and had better seats or whatever. But basically 5 cars. I had a car that was a Pontiac Sunburst, and it was a nice little car. There were 5 different versions of that. The Cadillac had a version called the Cimarron. So I tell people, oh, I drive a Cimarron around. Well, it was a poor boy's Cimarron. But that's what I'm showing you, that people wonder, why do we have so many distros? The same reason we have so many cars. Examples of main distros. Debian, Fedora, Arch were the 3 original back in the days when I did a presentation on the history of that. OpenSUSE and Slackware. These are all individually created by themselves. They don't have the connection except the Linux kernel. But then we have distros that are based on distros. The Linux Mint that I use is based on Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is based on Debian. And we have other ones that are Arch-based, Fedora-based, Debian-based. So a lot of people took the originals and made what they consider improvements and changes. There are 100 listed on DistroWatch, but there's more than that that are out there. Some of them aren't going to get recognized as good, and some of them come and go, like I said. One newest word that's out there, and Cal talked about it too, immutable distros. This is the new kind of distribution that's kind of locked down. There are parts of it that can't be modified. And that means it can't be damaged or something. And these are becoming popular because people like this extreme stability of these. So if it's a mutable distro, it's going to be one that has the bottom levels locked and can't be changed, and that's good. Sometimes they're called atomic distros. I heard that name too. So if you hear immutable or atomic, they're talking about the same thing, but these are ones that are read-only, hard locked down, and are maybe the future to be able to become more secure. Last, I think, couple things, upstream, downstream, not a fishing term. I should have put that, not talking about fishing, but in lingo, upstream is where software starts or an operating starts. The distro, it begins upstream, and then as it comes down the assembly line like a car, things get added. So downstream is what we usually buy. For cars, we go to the dealer, and that's car that came up the stream and down the stream and is the finished project, and we get it. The Linux kernel starts something upstream, and then developers add to it as it comes downstream, and then it comes to a side stream where somebody's going to make a different flavor of a distro or whatever. So upstream, downstream. Shell is the old stuff. When people who have been in computers for a long, long time, they'll remember shell is what they worked in. That was that DOS. That was the text only. And that's how you communicated with a computer, is through text talking. Now it opens up a graphical window and you can talk back and forth. That's what we call the terminal. And Linux uses a lot. If you want, you don't have to. I did not talk anything about the terminal except right now, or I didn't even show you it. Windows is going into it because they have it, but a lot of people never ever used the terminal part of Windows, but it was there. And when you had problems and they told you to use that, then you learned, oh, there is a text-based stuff that we do. Now we have terminal emulators. Back in the old days, I first started on computers. I went to some place and sat in a room with a keyboard and a screen. And that's all I had, and a wire that left the room and went down through the walls in the hall or whatever. And so I was on what they call a terminal. I did not have anything but a keyboard, no mouse back then, keyboard and a screen. And then I typed in things that went to the computer, and then the computer came back to me with some response. That was a terminal. Now our computers have terminal emulators, a piece of software that mimics a terminal so that you can do that old command line stuff. And all the terminals look different. There are different kinds. People say, well, that terminal is boring because it's just a plain screen with text. I'm going to let you be able to do this and that and whatever and make split screens and this and well, whatever. So finishing up, relating to cars, the kernel is the engine, a specific type of engine, gas, electric, hydrogen, whatever, Linux kernel. And again, Microsoft has a kernel, Apple has a kernel, all God's children have a kernel. The desktop operating system is your cars. And then we would say that the server's operating system, because there's a server operating system, that would be your heavy duty trucks doing big jobs, moving things around or whatever. The desktop environment in your car, that's the body, the doors, the roof, the dashboard, the seats, all of your things that come inside. And then you have themes and icons in computer and Linux. That's your paint job, your trim, the customizable features. And then last, you have applications. Those are accessories for specific purposes. You have a music system. I have to use that word now because we don't just use radio. Some cars have GPS systems in them, cruise controls, climate controls. These are all the applications that have been added to your car to make it better for you. And that's the same as in computers, applications to make things work better. And that's it for jargon. A lot of words. Hopefully it kind of answered a lot of Judy's questions about words she hears and what that means. And hopefully now she says, oh, now that makes sense.
I prefer a train engine for my kernel. Having the kernel be a train makes more sense to me than a car. For some reason.
But the train, it's the inside part that powers that engine.
Right.
Yeah. So
and I came up with 11 Linux SIGs, all on Zoom except for one. One group has recorded all of theirs, and it is at their group's YouTube channel, so you could look at theirs at any time. And I hope I don't find laggards out there who make it more than 11.
I hope there's more than 11.
I do too, because a lot of people are going to get stuck when this happens, which is really sad.
Well, and there are other Linux users out there that are in an island by themselves.
Yeah, they're good to go. They don't have to worry about all this junk.
Well, but I'm saying that there are people who would like to be part of a group. But
yeah.
If your group says we're a big Windows group, you know, or we're a computer group, that's why our club changed to technology users, so that we weren't focused or thought of as just a Windows group.
Right.
Yeah, check out. You might find people out there.
And you might be wishing that you had some people that you could talk to about Linux, and you should attend one of these groups so you have some kindred spirits out there.
Yeah, before I found out that our club had a group, there goes my vision again. I used to travel the 40 miles to go to Columbus to meet up with a group that was there. And then all of a sudden we started building one. So we have a pretty strong group now.
Yeah.
And I have to say that I can see one person right now on my list on the screen that our Linux group, which is one of the ones Judy has that's open, we have about as many members from out of state than we do from in town.
Yeah.
So we have a good group, I think.
And we have several groups that they attend, different groups meetings to get ideas on how they could start stuff, etc. Cal, are those hockey players kids, or are they your professional team? It's your background.
They are our defeated professional hockey team.
Oh, well, I have one of those too here. So that happens. Okay, I have some questions.
Oh boy.
I'll just kibitz along the way here. Oh, I know. I get asked, which backup program do you recommend? Which security antivirus program do you recommend? And I really don't. And because what I say is you need to talk about what your members are using and works best. And you have to decide what is easy for you. What is your goal? Is I want something that I could customize and make my own, like I have done every Windows computer that I have had since the DOS days, and try a few. How much would you have to do in order to get a flavor of what you could try out and see if you like it without spending the amount of time that I think you probably, if you're a very beginner, it would take you to find some that you liked? Because I would hate to, put everything all together and hate it with a passion. So can you?
The customizing is personal. We know people that don't customize at all. There goes the camera. It's what I see is what I got. And that's what I'm going to go with.
Okay, so that's like going to the store and buying a box of software.
Yeah, you only customize when you find out that what you've got doesn't do all that you want to do, but you learn that, oh, I can make some change. My suggestion is a new person listens to those of us in our Learning Linux group and ask for recommendations.
Yeah.
Our team, most of the time, are unified in saying it's probably Linux Mint that you want to try. Some people have said, try the one you said earlier, but the trick is that they only give you a couple of options and then you have to pay for the other design. And go with it. And it would be like a car. A lot of times you get a car based on what your friends have recommended because you don't have time to go. Well, especially if you're in a location that you don't have a mega mall. And you would have to drive a lot of different places to go and try out stuff. So you talk to your friends and you hear what they like. Here in Central Ohio, Honda is big because we've got a Honda plant, but you talk to your friends, you talk to us Linux users, and what do you like? And, you'll probably hear the words Ubuntu, Linux Mint, maybe you might hear Fedora, but it depends on how much of a new user. I would say if you're an experienced Windows user, you don't necessarily have to consider yourself a Linux beginner.
Okay.
You
Hey,
know,
Milton, if you're still here, what were you thinking of using? And you put that nifty presentation together from oh, there you are, from a point of view that you didn't have a clue what you were doing, but it was fun playing with it. Did I describe it correctly?
Yeah, you did. It was called Elementary OS, I think is what you're referring to.
Okay.
And it's super simple. It's just kind of different.
and
Okay.
that's the big problem. Windows users have absolutely zero choice. They are not used to having to make a decision and pick between things.
Yeah.
Windows users are back in the day with Henry Ford's Model T. You had one choice of a car. You didn't even have a color choice. It was black. Nowadays, we've got color choices, and boy, we see some strange colors. We say Henry Ford would be rolling in his grave if he ever saw that this car, his kind of car, has this color on it. But that's the thing. When you don't know what to do, you ask somebody that you trust, and they'll tell you. I will tell you Linux Mint. Linux Mint Cinnamon to give you a very similar Windows experience. Although my attitude is, if I want Windows, I'll stay with Windows, but, we have a couple of other people that are Linux people that you ask them and they'll say, well, I really enjoy this, just like a car. But ask.
Okay. Ask John to mention that although much software for Linux is free, donations are often solicited, although not mandatory. Yeah, that is very nice if you would support the people who are spending their time making them be able to be colorful and all that good kind of stuff.
Right. And a comment, because a lot of people know of my other slogan and on my slides, Free John.
Free John.
Most of what I do is free. Linux is free. LibreOffice is free. But, I do donate. And one particular donation, and I've done it twice, because I think the program is so good, I don't have to donate at all. It's a free program, and that's Free File Sync. And I donated when I first learned about it because I thought it was so great. And then a year later, I said, I'm going to give that person a few more bucks because it's a cross-platform free program. And, it a few bucks compared to what's on the market for some software. Support people. It doesn't take a lot.
Yeah, I know. For software that is Windows only, is VirtualBox and Linux a good choice? What?
Defer that to September. That is the Learning Linux program for the fourth Wednesday in September, and we are going to be talking about running Windows programs on Linux.
Okay, and that was what about using Wine?
That's going to be covered. So my personal feeling is I left Windows. I don't run Windows programs.
Yes.
So
I have that engraved right across my forehead. That's why I have these.
But that I will say as a preview, that is an option as a possibility. Come September when the schedule is free to find out if that'll work for you. Since
Linux is free, how do developers stay in business, donations, etc.? Perhaps a brief discussion would be nice. That is true, because people are usually cheap.
Right. A lot of them have corporate backing.
Well, I mean, users are cheap, not the people who put it together, because at Southwest, if the discount was over $19.99, nobody bought the discounted software that they brought with them for the vendor fare. Had to be lower than, I have no clue why, but it was just traditional.
Same thing on TV.
You know, you're going to charge me something, you know, more than 19.99. I'm not going to go any higher. And one of the vendors even mentioned that to me. And I thought, how perceptive he is.
That's what's on TV. You know, everything that's on sale on TV, from light bulb heads and stuff, is usually always $19.99 or less.
Yeah.
As a comment, like Fedora is a distribution company for Linux.
Mhm.
They make a Fedora for everybody, and then they make a Red Hat for enterprise. That is a paid program because they provide tech support for those businesses.
Got it. It's like, how can you have a free Avast? Well, back in the day when we liked Avast, you know, it was free. How did that happen? Well, they had business clients and they paid for it. And I'd go round and around with people. We just don't understand this. How can they have this business and we get it for free? Well, they make enough money to float it around and update it and all that good kind of stuff. And it worked out great for folks.
And the corporates that sponsor, I'll even have to say that it'll be a very surprise, and coming out of my mouth, that Microsoft does support financially some of the Linux activities. Because if you got to remember, if you've heard of WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, they are running Linux inside of Windows. I don't know why, and I don't want to know why, but they're a part of it. Ubuntu, the head of Ubuntu, is a millionaire South African who had the money to start their big corporation. A lot of these are people who are small teams that don't have a lot of money. That's where some donations come through. Linux Mint, there are a lot of people that donate to Linux Mint to help them go. So yeah, it's free, but sometimes they need help. Sometimes they get help. If they don't get help, they're gone.
Yeah. Tim, Tim, how do we access Chicago's videos on YouTube? Are they password protected or a login related to Chicago Computer Society mandatory, or your true Linux and get your own popcorn and have a good time watch and learn?
You there, Tim?
But Tim might be gone.
Yeah. I would go to their website.
I will.
Check.
Anyway, look, I have 4 more questions. Oh, that was the second person that asked that question.
We'll try to answer.
A lot of us have overused too. Oh, the Cajun Clickers. They are the only ones that do not use Zoom. And he says, a lot of us have old computers that we use to test new distros to see if we like them. Thank you. I'm just going to throw mine off the 3rd floor. Not the Linux, but of Windows. I use Debian. A Linux user used from APCUG downloaded it for me. Well, that was kind.
Yeah. Debian is one of the original, and the difference with Debian, it's very slow to come out with their new versions because they test the heck out of everything to make sure everything works and everything's secure before their next one comes out.
Cool.
So if there's a new version of LibreOffice, well, Debian people won't get it for a while because Debian will test it to death to make sure. So if you want a very super secure version of Linux, Debian is the way to go. But you have to say, I'm not going to have the greatest, the latest, but I'm going to have a heck of a secure, stable operating system. The opposite is Arch. Arch is the one that gets, whenever somebody gets a new version, okay, we get it and we send it out. And so you have the latest and greatest, but one of those updates could crash your computer. Then you're going to have to fix it yourself or get somebody. So those are the two extremes that way. But yeah, Debian, I like Debian because of it. I use the Linux Mint because it's even better, but it's based on Ubuntu. My desktops are running Linux Mint Debian Edition. It bypasses Ubuntu and just comes straight from Debian. The laptop, because of I use it at our club when most of those people use Linux Mint regular. So I use Linux Mint Debian Edition because it's coming from the super stable Debian and then gets all of the great features that the Linux Mint people improve on.
And you're more safe than sorry.
Usually.
Okay, and that's why you're doing what you're doing.
Once in a while, I do something I shouldn't do, and then I have to fix it. That's why I have backups.
Can I copy Excel and other file types from my Windows computer to a USB stick and then put the USB stick into a Linux computer and it can see, read all the files? Yes. Without having a specially formatted USB stick? Yes.
Yeah, because you're gonna have that formatted that Linux can read. As I said earlier, Linux reads all of Microsoft. And as I said, I can, if I have a live CD or live, we used to use CDs, a live thumb drive, and I plug it into your computer, I can access your files without your password because I'm going straight into the operating system folders.
I don't have a password.
What?
I don't have a password.
Yes, you do. You have to have a password.
No, I just sit here and look at my little computer and let it do its thing.
It has a password. But so when you put the stuff on, the thumb drive is going to be formatted that Windows can read. So if Windows can read it, then Linux will read it. And just like Judy said, she just opens it up and Linux or LibreOffice will read it. I will say, and I have to, that there are some very unique formulas or something or other that high-tech spreadsheet users create that are proprietary, and Microsoft is not letting anybody outside of Microsoft know how that thing works. So when LibreOffice opens it, it doesn't open it up just right. And that's Microsoft doing it by the, that's their choice.
Yes.
Playing together right. But other for everything, I have been using the LibreOffice, which was OpenOffice and then StarOffice before that, since the 2000s. And for me, I can do everything I need in a spreadsheet, word processor, or a presentation program. And if Windows can do, or Microsoft Office can do something, it must be something I don't need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Not everybody uses everything. I still can't figure out the native needing to know how to do things without, having to have 13 people tell me how to do it. I want to be able to do it myself.
You missed the paper. You missed the paper clip.
I have the paper clip. It's right here.
Clippy's gone.
All my paper clips are gold, by the way, and all my paper clip holders are crystal. I brought everything home when I retired from work. Of course, I bought everything in the first place. Hey, John, wait, before I give you the John, I have to ask. Some people just like to put things together and donate their time and expertise and the Linux development community, and they're happy campers and they don't expect to get paid for anything, and that's way cool. No password needed for the Chicago Computer Society YouTube videos. This is Dennis, not Tim. That's okay, Dennis. I don't know who you are, but I've known Tim for 1,000 years. And oh, I have the URL. Way cool. And that is it. My daughter, The oldest one's a teacher for 30 some years. The second one is my business person, and she is responsible, her HR and IT staff combined, which is really strange because she works in HR, and she is all her people, those people report to her. And I have to find out, because I asked her, are you going to move up to 11? Well, my computer's been all screwed up these last 2 weeks or a month, and I'm thinking they really need to get their act together. Because I'm going to ask if this is coming up sooner than I thought, where you had to fish and cut bait, so to speak, or whichever it is. And I want to know what the head people for those two departments are thinking about by waiting so long, because she hasn't heard any buzzing about with this is when we're going to do it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm amazed at the fact that she's responsible for the database and the computers for every single employee that is in the employee database. They send out people information to the employees, and it comes from, my kid or her staff and stuff like this. And I think they need to light a fire under something. And
I think they're hoping that Microsoft is going to back off.
oh, well, I've been told that already, that I shouldn't. Huey told me not to buy anything or pay $30 a month or a year or whatever it is. He thinks that they're going to do a turnaround, and they're really not going to do it. And they're going to give people more time in the long run. So, and my conspiracy theory was that the computer manufacturer, the hardware people, were not selling that many units of plastic and that kind of stuff. So they asked Microsoft to come up with a new OS, which is our TPM, that has to be, work flawlessly, and mine no longer meets the standard. And I think they came up with their little gimmick where they, are going to do something. But I am going to buy something that's reliable. I'm used to having things that work, and these last two, the Wednesday workshop that wasn't, and this one, you guys wouldn't believe my computer. It's just absolutely fallen apart. It's incredible. So, any other quick questions? I hope that's not a Christmas tree on your cup, Cal.
But it is.
I knew that. He thinks I'm always talking to somebody else, that there's somebody in the room with him that I can see. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned a lot. John, I'm sure, has all this good kind of stuff that he can, let everybody know about. Is this something that you could use before everything hits the fan, or you never want to do this again? What's your pleasure?
Who?
You guys.
Oh, well, I was going to say Richard got his hand up, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, Richard. Oh, I want everybody here. John Kennedy.
Yeah.
I want you to attend Melbourne's SIG. Okay. What time? You're 4 a.m.
7:45 p.m. here in Melbourne, which might be very early in the morning in America.
No,
I'll just warn you on that.
No, it's 11:46. No, it's 11:47 a.m. But yeah. I think you guys have a golden opportunity to say you've been to Melbourne.
Yeah, right.
But I think that would be cool. Bob, Bob G was always sad that nobody asked him to do a presentation, and he doesn't do presentations anymore.
Or
But
through
That
AVAS.
made him feel bad. And Jean Barlow had the opportunity to do it, though. Hooray to Zoom.
Just a reminder for John and everyone that if you're going to be loading up Linux on your computer, sometimes you'll need to go into the BIOS and turn off secure boot. Otherwise, you won't be able to load Linux in it.
Huh.
Absolutely. Hopefully more of the Linuxes are going to cooperate and work better with the EFI and secure boot. But part of it is that secure boot is Microsoft doesn't want anything else booting up to it. So,
Oh,
but then the problem is if you're dual booting, when we talk about dual booting, that if you turn off secure boot, then Windows won't boot. So you have to go back in, turn on secure boot to do Windows, turn it off to do Linux.
what's TPM?
Oh, that's that security.
I'm blaming that on my
That's
misery.
why you can't go to Windows 11.
Yeah, that's my bottom line end result. I looked it up, and that's what something in there changed, and my computer no longer can turn into a Windows 11 computer.
Sometimes you can go into the BIOS and look for something different. My desktop has that ability. I could go to Windows 11 on it anytime I wanted to turn that on, but I didn't want to turn it on.
I know, just rub it in.
Yeah, but it isn't. But on my BIOS, it's not listed as TPM. I had to go into my manual for it and found, oh, that's the same thing. Turn it on, and then you can go.
Well, I don't have any place to go right now.
Well, it's a online. Get your motherboard information. Joel.
Yeah, Fedora Linux has supported secure boot for years because I've used it on my laptop for a long time, and I'm pretty sure Linux Mint also does. And I'm doing some experimenting still with KVM, but one of the things that KVM will do is emulate a TPM version 2, and I am hoping that that is sufficient to be able to even do a Windows 11 install under KVM without bypassing anything. If you can enable secure boot for the KVM machine and TPM2.
Yeah. As I said, they're finally saying it's a battle that we can either fight or we can make it. Do we want to not use secure boot, or do we want people to be able to load Linux on those desktops? Because the manufacturers are following what Microsoft tells them to do, and they say requires boot. So Linux, like I said, Fedora and Mint probably said, okay, we are going to design it so that it will work. We'll put whatever has to be in code so it will be acceptable. Thanks, Joel.
But one of the interesting possibilities is if you can emulate TPM2 under a KVM virtual machine on a Linux Mint that's running on a machine that doesn't support Windows 11 directly, you may be able to run Windows 11 or Windows 11 in that environment and have the best of both worlds if you really don't want to upgrade your hardware.
Interesting. Report back when you find out more.
Will do.
And I'm here to say, don't forget, we need presentations. We love other people's presentations. I'm the kibitzer. I have important knowledge to share with everything that I don't know anything about. But I ask the questions that you guys know things that other people don't know things, and I'll ask those kinds of questions, which is what I did today.
I'm working towards a KVM development, but I wanted to be able to do it on something other than just Fedora because I know how few people are using Fedora.
Oh.
And if I can get it to work under Linux Mint, I figure that's probably one of the best ones to be able to demonstrate the capabilities.
And I have people from 11 groups here. I better not find out that there's 12, 13, or 14 groups out there, though.
All the people today are from those 11 groups.
Oh, well, I'm a teacher and a Grammy, and I mean it.
I'd like to thank everybody for attending. This ends our May series of workshops. We adjust things because of doing a Saturday one. And there's also when we have weeks with 5 and stuff, but we'll be back for 3 workshops in June, which is not too far away. Got 1 more week of May. So we look forward to you joining us back in June, and then in July, and then August will be our next Saturday Safari. So please share your links that you get with people that haven't been here. We have plenty of room in our Zoom room for more people to attend. So thank everybody for attending.